have got more out. I could have got more. I don't know if I just... I could have got more.
Oscar, there are 1,100 people who are alive because of you. Look at them.
If I made more money... I threw away so much money. You have no idea. If I just...
There will be generations because of what you did.
I didn't do enough.
You did so much.
This car. Gert would have bought this car. Why did I keep the car? 10 people right there. 10 people. 10 more people. This pin. 2 people. This is gold. 2 more people. You would have given me 2 for it. At least 1. You would have given me 1. 1 more. 1 more person.
That, of course, is from a movie 27 years ago, Schindler's List. And Oskar Schindler was given a gift to stop and pause and do a performance review of his life up to that point. To reevaluate his life in terms of his values, his priorities, his choices. And as a tradition, every year when we come to this time in the calendar, we kind of stop and look back and we see how we've handled this year. Are we as far along as we had hoped? And this year we might look at things a little different and say how this year handled us. And a lot of people are just anxious. Let's just get 2020 behind us. But before we do that this morning, we want to take a look and we want to have a performance review. And how do we have a performance review? As you know, and you're going to find out more this morning, that I've been to Israel, and some of you don't know that, and I don't know how in the world you could not know that. It's like friends of mine saying, did Rod mention his hole-in-one in church? You know, because he talks about it all the time. You know, he mentions it every Sunday. He announced it every Sunday about his hole-in-one that he got this year. So in those terms, 2020 was great, if not for that one moment that I got a hole-in-one. But going to Israel 3 times, there was one time I was over there for 3 weeks. And there was one thing I did not get to see that I wanted to see. And I went back 3 times to try to see this. And I want to show you the outside of it. And the outside was Oskar Schindler's grave. Just right outside the old city. It stays locked. In fact, I took a picture of the lock that this particular graveyard is locked. Now, there's on the Mount of Olives, there's a lot of white, I'm going to call them caskets. They aren't caskets, but there's the largest Jewish cemetery in the world on the Mount of Olives. But this is a different cemetery where Oskar Schindler's grave is. And when you go through the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem, they have one of the corners or one of the rooms is for the righteous from the nations, the Gentiles, who acted in such a way to preserve the Jews. And he was in there. In fact, I had taken his picture, and I said, I'm going to go to his grave. So I went down there once with a friend and twice by myself, and I never could get to his grave. But I wanted to see his grave. Because he had a chance, and I remember this scene, he had a chance to reevaluate his life in terms of what was important and priorities. The Apostle Paul had a chance to look at his life. We've been talking in the book of Philippians about Paul being in a Roman jail. At this point, he was under house arrest, under Roman guard, and he writes a letter to the Philippians, to the church at Philippi. And remember, the church at Philippi was the first European church that he established. It had a businesswoman was like the first convert, and she was like the mainstay of that church. And so it was a very entrepreneurial church in that way. And so they send a gift to the Apostle Paul. And he stops and he's reflecting on his life. And here's what he says in chapter 1, beginning in verse 18b, the end of 18. He says, yes, and I will continue to rejoice. In my current situation, I will continue to rejoice, for I know that through your prayers, in other words, the prayer of the Philippian church, and God's provision of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, what has happened to me will turn out for my deliverance. What has happened in the past will turn out for a different future, he's thinking, for my deliverance. My future is going to look different from my presence right now. I eagerly expect and hope that I will in no way be ashamed. So in the future, he's hoping that because of what they've done for him, because of the life and the choices he's made, that he will not be ashamed, but will have sufficient courage so that now, as always, Christ will be exalted in my body, whether by life or by death. And he gives this capstone. This is his marching orders. This is the phrase to which he guides himself through the year. For to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain. To live is Christ, and to die is gain. At the year, we look back and we say, well, I wish I would have done more. And wish I could have gotten this accomplished. I wish I would have purchased this. I wish I would have studied this. I wish I would have learned this. And it seems to me that there's 3 criteria where we are judged. Number 1, we judge ourselves. We might judge ourselves harshly or might judge ourselves very lightly. But we end up looking and judging ourselves. Did I accomplish the things that a year ago I was standing here and I was thinking, I would like to see this happen in the next year? Now, some of those plans got sidelined, but we're in a different place, not geographically, but time-wise. Time-wise, we're in a different place, and we ask ourselves, have I accomplished, have I gotten the things or learned the things that I hoped I would learn? But hopefully you can look back and say, well, I know the book of Ephesians better than I knew it before. I know some of the Psalms better than I knew before. I know the book of Philippians. Rod, I could walk you through the book of Philippians. So we judge ourselves and we say, I wish I'd have read more, or I wish I'd have done more, or I wish I'd have gotten that promotion at work. We judge ourselves, either harshly or lightly. Other people judge us. Other people look at us and they say, and a lot of times they end up coming with the wrong conclusion about what they see. Like my mother. My mother ascribed to me nervousness, and there's always some nerves in getting on stage, but I was just flat out of breath. Others are very eager to judge us and to say, you should have done this, or you shouldn't have done that. And they're eager to point their fingers at us. There's another kind of judgment that happens too. And that's history. History judges us. Last week we looked at one king. We predominantly spent our time on one king. And we predominantly spent our time in an area the Bible is silent. We learn about Bethlehem. And we looked at the fact that what was going on there that none of the gospel writers tell you about is the Herodium. There's a mountain 3 miles away, and it's a man-made mountain. And I want to review that because I want to show you the flip side of this whole thing. So this is the man-made mountain. It's about 9 miles from Jerusalem. And this right here, this picture would have been probably in 2012. I'm just guessing this picture would have been taken. I visited it in 2015, 16, and 17. And so if you go and you look further, this place was just it was just unbelievable. The things that it had in it. Think about Disney World. This is like going to Disney World. Because if you look behind there, go back just for a second. If you look behind there to the top left, that's heading off into the Judean desert. So this is like the last stop before you get to desert and wasteland. And King Herod that we looked at that built this, King Herod loved to defy nature. This thing had all kinds of things going on. We'll look at just a couple of them. The first thing, this was a synagogue that was built probably, this was put in there about after Jesus had come on the scene. They think this was kind of established about 132 to 135 AD. It's during the Jewish revolt against Rome. And so they hid out here. This was a fortress that they'd hide out. Now, you're probably familiar with Masada. And whenever I ask somebody that, when we go over there, I ask them, I say, okay, when we come back, what was the thing that had the biggest impact on you in visiting Israel? Number one or number two is going to be Masada. It's just unbelievable. But this place, it had that same fortress mentality. And the reason I want to talk about the Herodium again is because the Herodium demarcates a life. You had Herod dying and being buried here. And we found just a few years ago, they found a Pilate ring there. And that life that is stuck right in between that is Christ coming to earth and living. And we know Pilate sentenced Jesus to death. But you had things like a Jewish synagogue. You had a mikveh. This is a bath, a ritual bath. This is up in the top of there. And then you had other things. You had a theater. Now, this was a photo that I took in 2016. Since that time, they've now opened this part and they've restored this theater. It seats over 400 people. And there's new views of this. They've just, within the last 6 months, opened this area up for you to walk in and walk up these steps and everything. But they had a theater. They had, this was the place, that little statue, that little item that you see right there on the left side of the screen, that filled this whole area. In fact, from the base of that to the top was over 80 feet tall. In the bottom of that, in that room underneath those columns, was where King Herod was buried. And in 2007, we looked at this last week, Ehud Netzar, they discovered he'd been looking for this since 1972. He personally had been looking for this tomb since 1972. And they finally found this at this spot in digging. And sometimes you wonder, why don't they just go dig it up? Why don't they just dig everything up? And they pace their digging. They're only able to excavate 10% of a site every 10 years. So in other words, during a 100-year period of time, you would have done the whole site. But that's kind of the goal. And the reason why is because archaeology, by its very nature, is destructive. When you dig down and you see this, and you keep digging down for the different layers, you're destroying what was there. So they spend a lot of time marking this. And we know that from the base to the top was over 80 feet high. It was like 80 feet, 2 inches. And they found most of these pieces they had to put back together. They found 3 sarcophagi, I guess, and one of them, they believe, was King Herod's, that was red in color, and then there were 2 white ones there, family members. And these were just mashed all up. And they believe that Jewish revolt I told you about in 132 to 135, 36, they believe that's when they were mashed up, broken up. Because who are they revolting against? Rome. And who was Herod buddies with? Rome. So there was all kinds of sites there. And then if you go underneath, these were part of the big cisterns. There are 6 cisterns. That's not sisters, cisterns. These are big rooms that held water. Now remember, you're in the desert. You're right on the foot of the desert. And Herod loved to pump water and have that whole place filled with water. And he, in fact, we looked at last time, I don't have it up well, I'll show you some pictures of it here in a second. But there's a large, huge swimming pool, bigger than any Olympic-sized swimming pool that I've ever seen. But I'm sure there are bigger ones out there than I've seen. But these were filled with water. 4 of those were in existence during Herod's day. There were 2 more added later. This is one of the ones you can go in and you can look. But these things are huge, and they were filled with water. Let me see, what's my next picture? Okay, this is an artist rendering of the way it's about 1.5 minutes long. And you can see this was the hill, and this would have been the way that Herod might have constructed this. Or there was this long staircase that walked up. This was where the theater would go, right in that side. The theater is facing Jerusalem. Remember, Jerusalem is to the north. And that is the eastern tower. I mean, there's all kinds of gardens, and it's like a spa in there. They had it in Masada as well, where you could go in and say this was like the spa room of this. So this is Summer Palace, and remember, this is the only one he named after himself. There was Caesarea, there was Masada, and then this was called the Herodium, named after him. And he knew he would be buried there. That was the plan. This whole complex down below, this was a pool. I mean, it is huge. You could paddle from one end to the other. It's just huge. And these were where government offices would be when he would come from Jerusalem. Jerusalem was more of a religious center. This would have been more of a governmental center in the life of in Herod's administration. So this gives you an idea of what this must have been like. And this is where he would have been buried. And again, from the base of that to the top would be about 80 feet. And you go inside there, and there were 3 of these. And there was a big thing with National Geographic in 2008 when they kind of announced this and revealed it to the world. That's where Herod would have laid. Okay, and then the next one is and I don't speak Spanish or whatever the language this is in, but I grabbed this. This tells you the intricacies of this. This place was unbelievable. You just go on, kids, have fun. You know, they would get lost. There was just so many places in this mountain you could go. In fact, when you're going out, you're just in tunnel after tunnel after tunnel, and it's very cool when you get in that tunnel. I was there all 3 times. Well, one time I've been in June and 2 times in May. It's very cool, but you get the idea. This is an oasis, and it's a fortress, and it's a palace. We got another picture of this, and you can see the complex, how much of a complex this was, with the Herodium up on the mountain and the fortress there. And then there's another one with that, just an artist understand. And if you look back, see that body of water at the top of your screen? That's the Dead Sea. So if you got up high enough, you could see the Dead Sea and the open desert there. And then I want you to keep this slide up for a second. Sherlock Holmes had one of his mysteries. It was called The Hound of Baskerville. And if you remember, think about, before I tell you, because I want you to get there, remember the solution to that mystery? The solution was the dog that didn't bark. The hound that didn't bark. That was the key to unlocking that. I've shown you how marvelous and how wonderful and how unbelievable the Herodium is. But look at this picture right here, and I took this picture. What do you not see? People. You don't see people. Let's look at another picture of it. There's a couple of us, but I got to tell you, that those guys right there are in the group I'm with. There's about 40 of us in this group, about 38 of us in this group. And those guys I'm taking a picture of, they're with me, or I'm with them. You go to the Herodium, and you can spend as much time as you want. And you can walk around, and you don't bump into anybody or anything. This was one of the biggest wonders of the world 2,000 years ago. This was unbelievable. This was the shiny toy that you'd want to show people. If you were a foreign dignitary coming in and you were Herod, you'd want to show him this place. Jerusalem and the temple, that's nice, but you need to see what I've got down here, just 9 miles south of here. It's a kicking place. We got a pool. We got a sauna. We got all kinds of stuff down, all kinds of games. Bring the kids. You'll have a blast. Stay there for months. You'll love it. But 2,000 years later, it's hard to find anybody there. Now I want to show you another place, 3 miles away. I want to show you today, another place today. This was 2016. And I want you to look. Let's go to Bethlehem. And this is a picture. I took this one. This is inside the church of Bethlehem. When I was there, they were working on it. Even though I've been to Israel 3 times, I've only been to this church once. And I'm going to tell you why here in a second. But there's the scaffolding because they're strengthening and restoring this Church of the Nativity. Now, I want you a quick video of this. This was shot by a friend of mine on his GoPro. And even with the scaffolding, there's a gob of people there. A gob of people. In fact, the next one is going to be, this has the sound on. This is me taking this. And we're going to have about 3 minutes here. And I want you to listen what's going on. That's my head right there. See? That's Randy on the left.
I think there's people must be praying down there or something.
Yeah, they're down on their knees. And some are crawling in to take a picture or to touch the rock.
Yeah.
These guys in front of me are in our group. They're all graduate students.
He didn't play around.
It's about 150 degrees in here.
I'm whining.
As I said, you really can't blame these people for going so
Yeah.
slow because it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. But and when people crawl down there and want to put their hand in the star in a line like this, other people can't take pictures or clean pictures.
Now, by this time, we've been waiting about an hour inside the church to get to this point.
My group, please stay to the right side. My group. Stay to the right side behind the people.
Так, кто еще из нашей группы остался? Есть кто-нибудь наверху?
It's called a grotto.
Есть наверху кто-нибудь? Нет? Так, я здесь. Так, ты иди сюда.
All right, we're getting ready for the drum roll here. Okay. You can go to the next slide. That was it. I waited an hour and 150 degrees to see that. With 4 billion of my closest friends. This is a picture I got offline about this. Because I never saw it from that view, because there's only 4 million or billion of my other closest friends there. Now I want you to think for just a moment here. When I take a group to Israel, we don't go to Bethlehem. But it's not worth it. And you know where everybody wants to go? They want to go to Bethlehem. What could make something 2,000 years later be completely irrelevant, and something that seemingly is irrelevant so precious? History has judged Herod and Jesus very differently. And the things, the time and the effort and the energy that Herod spent to create this incredible palace, this incredible fortress, and they have people like me. And people will wait over an hour in 150 degrees, bunched up, smelling each other, to see a little star in a grotto cave on the floor. Because sometimes it takes history for us to evaluate the things that we thought were so important in the past, we understand will not be that important in the future. And because that star represents a baby that came that changed people's future. That star represents the baby that changed the trajectory of people. And as you and I look back on 2020, and as we have our performance review, and as we review from ourselves, and as we have others review us, we need to stop and say, how will history 1 year from now review us? How about 10 years from now? How about 2,000 years from now? Will the things that we thought were so important and must do, will those things, and must build and must have and must acquire, will those things be kind of like Herod's palace? Will it be like Oscar Schindler's car or his ring or his pen, where he asked, why? Why? We need to learn the lesson of the Apostle Paul and say, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. And we need to step into 2021 with that mindset, with that thought, so that 2,000 years from now, we don't look back and say, nobody's interested in that. Nobody's interested in my degrees. Nobody's interested in my automobiles. Nobody's interested in anything I have. We're going to look and have our kids and say, man, I'm so glad that heaven looks different because of choices that I made. Oscar Schindler had the chance to reevaluate and do a performance review. We have just done a review. And maybe you might think the Herodium is more important. That's fine. But I'm just telling you, the majority of people that have a choice to choose between visiting the Herodium and visiting a little star in the floor chooses the star. because of the values and the ideas it represents. So may 2021, as we look to that future, may we learn from 2020. And may us understanding that to live is Christ and to die is gain. Let's pray. Father, you have been so faithful to us. You have taught us so much. We are where we are this day because of choices that we made 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 weeks ago, even this morning. May we step into 2021 with an assurance of your faithfulness, and may we embrace the ideas and values that you came to set in our hearts so that 2021 would be a year that matters. For it's in Christ's name I pray.